every American who visits our nation's Hall of Heroes in the Pentagon, where his name is now being enshrined, James Anderson will never die. He will continue to live as part of our nation's brave history. For a group of young Marines, his comrades, whom he saved from certain death, James Anderson will never be forgotten. For you who knew him and loved him, the memory of James Anderson will be a proud and inspirational source of comfort. Private First Class Anderson was a typical Marine. Like thousands of young Marines, he was an infantryman. He knew from the day he entered the Marine Corps that he was entering a man's world and that he would carry a man's responsibilities.
Carrying a man's responsibilities in a man's world. An appropriate description of the typical Marine in 1968 or any year. Part of a close-knit team, he is still an individual and must, in the final analysis, depend upon his own personal strength to see the job through. January, and the new commandant of the Marine Corps arrives in Vietnam, just 2 days after taking office. January 20th, Khe Sanh, and the enemy launches a determined major assault to overrun the area. The 26 Marines and the South Vietnamese troops say nothing doing, no matter how tough the going, and they give as good as they get. Whenever there's a chance, dig in a little bit more. And before you know it, there's more of Khe Sanh below ground than on top of it. Safer that way when the enemy starts lobbing them in. They don't all miss, not by a long shot. Casualties are soon on their way to a hospital via medevac. Air support is tremendous, almost around the clock. And the Marine in the trenches of Khe Sanh knows his buddies up in the sky are doing everything possible to ease his situation. Add long-range aerial support day and night, and Khe Sanh holds out week after week for 77 days in the face of the numerically superior enemy forces. Aerial resupply is the only way to get the necessary cargoes of guns, ammunition, and food into Khe Sanh. And day after day, aircraft load up in Da Nang, take off on mission after mission. It's no picnic. Heavy enemy artillery fire makes every landing a game of chance, and some of the planes don't make it. But they come rolling in because the Marines in the trenches need the supplies. Cargoes are unloaded in seconds, and the aircraft barely stop rolling. things are too rough, supplies come floating in under parachutes. One way or another, they get there. Just 10 days after the initial assault, and while intensifying the pressure on Khe Sanh, the enemy launches his wide-ranging Tet offensive. For the Marines, this means Hue City. Fighting is violent, and if ever a Marine had to rely on his own quickness and toughness, this was it. House to house, street to street, for 3 long weeks. Casualties are heavy in the house-to-house fighting, and the enemy resistance is stiff. After the first day, Marines own just 2 blocks of the city. 2 blocks, and the price is dear. As the days wear on, progress is made on both sides of the river. Good communications are vital in this kind of operation. And decisions are made from minute to minute. Bad weather curtails air support missions most of the time, but whenever there is a slight lift, the planes pour it on. Maintenance and repair for equipment, tanks, guns, everything is a continuing problem. But the job gets done, on time, and the Marines in the streets get their resupply on schedule. Troops and supplies move up the river to join the battle for Hue. Fighting rages on both sides of the river. After almost 3 weeks of some of the war's toughest fighting, the end is in sight. On the north side of the river, the enemy's position begins to crumble. Marines, along with the South Vietnamese Army, Marine, and Ranger units, move into the Imperial Palace. And on the south side, Marines are securing the city, mopping up nests of enemy resistance, still house to house. Finally, the job is finished. 25 days of heavy fighting. Enemy losses in the thousands. And each Marine knows he's been a part of a historic battle. Knows he rates the traditional, well done. But Khe Sanh is still under siege. The Tet offensive is still underway. And more troops may be needed. At El Toro Marine Corps Air Station, the 27th Regimental Landing Team ships out for temporary duty in Vietnam, with President Johnson on hand to wish them Godspeed.
At Quang Tri, at Hue, at Da Nang, at Khe Sanh tonight, United States Marines stand squarely in the path of his plan. Freedom's defense could not be in better hands.
During the same month, the Women Marines celebrate their 25th anniversary. Formed during World War II to release Marines for combat duty, the Molly Marines have become a permanent part of the Marine Corps. Performing non-combative duties, they have allowed more and more Marines to do what they do best, fight. Vietnam is no exception. In March, elements of the 6th Fleet in the Mediterranean conduct an amphibious landing exercise in Corsica, one of several comprehensive training missions held during the year. Another major operation was held in the Caribbean with the Royal Netherlands Marines. Assault landings, the primary mission of the Marines. Continuous training to ensure quick reaction should something happen in addition to Vietnam. Khe Sanh. In March, the siege by the enemy is still underway, but now the end is in sight. 2.5 months of shelling day and night. No hot chow, mud and grime, red dust. But now Marines are moving out into the hills looking for the enemy. The pressure is dropping. Time to read letters. A month earlier, you might have carried a letter 2 or 3 days before getting a chance to read it. Time to clean up the mess from a hit on the ammunition dump. Time to start getting back in shape. Khe Sanh combat base holds, prevents the enemy from gaining free access to the northern provinces, ties down 20,000 North Vietnamese soldiers, and triggers severe attrition to enemy forces. Why didn't the enemy attack? Because airstrikes kept him pinned down, and because each probing action was crushed, any major assault would have met the same fate. April, May, and the day-to-day routine in Vietnam continues. Maintenance and overhaul of weapons and equipment, repairing battle-damaged items, keeping the troops supplied. The patrols, the countless patrols into enemy-held territory, the relentless probing for action. Sometimes they are a so-called walk in the sun with no enemy. Then there is the other kind. The Marines have time for more than combat action. They are continuing psychological operations designed to weaken the enemy and strengthen local influence. For example, the plastic balls and pens given away to villagers carry a message to enemy soldiers to stop fighting and join the South Vietnamese. Offer rewards for disclosing the location of caches of weapons and ammunition. Then, as he has always done under combat operations, the Marine somehow finds time to make friends with the local people, especially the children. It's not just in the cities, but right out in the villages. For example, vaccine may be made available for cattle, but at the same time, Marines show villagers how to administer it, how often. Other programs supported by the Marine Civic Action Fund include vocational training programs in the cities, job placement assistance. It still boils down to individuals, though. One Marine befriending one Vietnamese. And no one will ever know how many sick children and adults are treated. There's always time, even during combat operations. June 1968. Khe Sanh is deactivated and the fortifications and equipment destroyed to prevent enemy usage. The end of a story. One of the few times in the history of the Corps that Marines have been called upon to defend a site. In Hawaii, the end to another Marine Corps story. General Krulak retires, and General Buse takes over as Commanding General, Fleet Marine Force Pacific. At about the same time, in June and July, Marine forces were continuing operations more in keeping with their mission, attack. Operations Kentucky II and Lancaster II. As always, air support is close at hand and on target, thanks to the air controllers and spotter planes. A new Marine aircraft makes its debut in Vietnam in 1968, the OV-10A Bronco. Primarily a spotter plane for airstrikes and artillery support, the Bronco is faster and less vulnerable to ground fire due to its slim silhouette. Close air support, a vital facet of almost every mission. A man's responsibilities in a man's world. The Marine accepts it, and sometimes the cost is great. The results of the small patrols that are so much a part of the Vietnam War. Sometimes prisoners are captured, or in many cases they defect from their units. A continuing reward is the discovery of stockpiles of enemy arms, ammunition. Many times stores of food and rice used to feed infiltrating troops. If there's one thing that could be called the backbone of Marine assault operations, both large and small, it's the use of helicopters to move troops quickly and in strength to the site of enemy troop concentrations. Reaction time is almost immediate, and the element of surprise adds effectiveness to each mission. Once the landing zone is reached and the enemy has decided to engage the Marines, the battle is on. Support and resupply of troops in the field comes from above, from the big CH-46 helicopters that bring in the ammunition, food, and water, and artillery pieces, whatever is needed, when it's needed. These same helicopters furnish a quick means of transporting the wounded to base hospitals on their return flights. Medivacs to howitzer lifts. The CH-53 is a fantastic workhorse. But what about acrobatics? The blueprints say no, but a Marine and a Sikorsky pilot say yes, and over she goes in maneuvers over Long Island Sound. When there's time for a break, or when the mission is completed, there always seems to be some hot chow available, and some hot coffee, story swapping, and mail from home. You don't have much time to see what the other guy is doing in a firefight, so you try to catch up afterwards. Training, the heart of the Marine Corps. It goes on even out in the field, in between combat missions. Being ready, knowing how, a hallmark of every Marine. Throughout 1968, training exercises are conducted all over the world. One of the largest, Operation Bellbanger, gets underway in July at Camp Pendleton, California. Regular Marines and reservists go ashore together in a full-scale amphibious exercise. An increasing emphasis is being placed on submarine reconnaissance. special teams are popping up in training exercises all over the world. They remember the 50th anniversary of Marines fighting in France during World War I. And they honor the oldest living Marine Medal of Honor winner, Horton, his fighting done in Peking in the Boxer Rebellion. August, the Apollo 7 launch. And Major Cunningham takes the Marines into space, a long way from the Boxer Rebellion. Later in the same month, the Commandant of the Marine Corps travels to Camp Lejeune to dedicate the new Force Troops Complex. A modern concept in living quarters, it will serve as a pattern for other barracks at bases all over the country. Also in August, President Johnson awards the Presidential Unit Citation to the 26th Marine Regiment for their action at Khe Sanh. Other PUCs for the year go to the 27th Regiment, the 1st Air Wing, the 1st Division, and the 5th Marines. A lot of Marines, each one doing a man's job in a man's world. Members of a team, yes, but each one depending on his own capability to see the job through. Capability stems from training. At Vieques, off the coast of Puerto Rico, artillery firing exercises go on month in, month out, night and day. September, Operation Swift Play 2, Scotland 2, and the Marines are still in there doing their job, pushing the enemy further and further back. At the same time Operations Swift Play 2 and Scotland 2 are underway, the 27th Regimental Landing Team prepares to go home, their temporary tour of duty in Vietnam completed. A job well done. The Marines are on the move, enemy action reduced, and the 27th can be released for other duty. Happy? You can bet these men can't wait to land in San Diego. Marines have marched down a lot of streets in a lot of cities, but the welcome in San Diego for these Vietnam veterans is about as rousing as any to date. November, and all American aerial, naval, and artillery bombardment of North Vietnam is terminated. Yet the ground fighting goes on. The walks in the sun continue. The hell-born attacks still mount up. November, the 193rd anniversary of the Marine Corps. And they celebrate it the way they've celebrated many an anniversary, fighting. later, Operation Meade River kicks off, the largest Marine combat helicopter effort in history. 3,500 Leathernecks airlifted into some 47 different landing sites to encircle a large enemy contingent. Peace talks in Paris, fighting in Vietnam. Confusing to many, but not to him. He accepts his responsibilities. A man in a man's world. The Marine in 1968.